The Zeldar Imperium had ruled the galaxy for millennia, an empire built on conquest and submission. They had encountered countless species, all of whom either surrendered at the mere sight of their fleet or were swiftly eradicated. Their technology was unrivaled, their strategies refined over thousands of wars. The thought of a species resisting them was laughable. Then they found Earth. At first, humans were nothing more than another primitive race, scattered across their homeworld in a handful of outposts. Their ships were slow, their weapons crude compared to the Zeldar's energy-based armaments. The Imperium's analysts estimated full planetary subjugation within days, if not hours. A single fleet was dispatched with an ultimatum: surrender and be integrated or resist and be annihilated. The response was baffling. No desperate pleas, no negotiations, no attempt to stall. Just a brief, chilling transmission. Come and see. The Zeldar took this as either arrogance or ignorance. Either way, it would be corrected soon enough. The fleet arrived in Earth's orbit, ready to make an example of the defiant world. Standard procedure dictated an overwhelming show of force to break planetary morale, orbital bombardment, citywide destruction, key infrastructure obliterated. A few decisive strikes, and the species would either kneel or perish. Plasma rained down from the sky, turning cities to molten slag. Satellites were incinerated, military bases reduced to craters. Yet, there was no surrender. Instead, something unexpected happened. Humanity fought back. The Zeldar were accustomed to planetary defenses crumbling within hours. Their sensors, however, told a different story. Military installations had been hit, but their command networks remained functional. Even as smoke filled the air, human forces were moving, adapting. Their response was neither panicked nor desperate. It was calculated. And then the real nightmare began. The Zeldar had seen planetary defenses before: missiles, energy barriers, automated turrets. But Earth's response was something else entirely. They didn't just fight with conventional weapons. They fought with strategy. Guerrilla tactics, electronic warfare, psychological manipulation. The moment the Imperium believed they had control, the battlefield shifted beneath them. Their fleet's communication systems began failing, overridden by human interference. Terrifying messages flooded their screens, messages they did not understand. Scrambled signals, whispers in unknown languages, the same phrase repeated over and over: come and see. Their targeting systems glitched, friendly fire incidents increased, and entire battalions found themselves cut off, ambushed in what should have been secured zones. Zeldar ground forces faced a war unlike any before. Their adversaries did not line up in neat formations. They attacked from shadows, struck without warning, disappeared into the ruins. The Imperium was built on overwhelming firepower, but humans fought with adaptability and patience. Reports came in of entire platoons vanishing, their last transmissions filled with static and screams. Zeldar commanders dismissed these as anomalies, until the numbers became undeniable. The more they advanced, the worse it became. The Empire had come expecting submission or annihilation. What they got was something else entirely. Something they had never encountered. Feh! The first real battle report stunned the Zeldar High Command. They had assumed humans would fight like any other species, desperate, disorganized, hopelessly outgunned. Instead, they encountered something terrifyingly different. The enemy did not break under overwhelming firepower. They adapted. They learned. They fought like they had been preparing for this war their entire existence. The Zeldar command structure, rigid and hierarchical, struggled to comprehend what was happening. Their officers, trained for wars of sheer dominance, were now dealing with an enemy that refused to engage on predictable terms. Supply lines vanished overnight, communication hubs collapsed, and entire regiments reported psychological disturbances. It started subtly. At first, it was just whispers over the comms, distorted voices speaking in broken Zeldar, strange symbols appearing on their data feeds. Then it escalated. Warships reported ghost signals mimicking their distress beacons, drawing reinforcements into ambushes. Troop carriers landed in supposedly secured zones, only to find every building abandoned, except for the words, "Come and see," scrawled in alien blood. The Zeldar relied on their superior technology to control the battlefield, but the humans turned it against them. Their drones were hacked mid-flight, rerouted to attack their own forces. Orbital surveillance systems were hijacked, feeding the Imperium false data. The Empire had crushed civilizations spanning thousands of worlds, but it had never fought an enemy that understood fear and how to use it as a weapon. Every attempt to establish control met catastrophic failure. Ground convoys were lured into kill zones where they were picked apart with surgical precision. Elite strike teams infiltrated Zeldar warships, disabling them from within before slipping away unnoticed. No one understood how they were doing it. Humanity's weapons were primitive, yet they were being wielded with terrifying effectiveness. Zeldar Command issued a full tactical reassessment, but it was already too late. Their forces were stretched thin, their supply chains severed, their soldiers demoralized beyond repair. In war, the Imperium had always held the psychological advantage. Now, for the first time, they felt something alien: paranoia. Zeldar units refused to patrol at night. Officers reported troops waking up screaming, speaking of shadows that watched them, voices that whispered from the dark. When they deployed tracking systems to hunt human insurgents, they found only empty bunkers, filled with recordings of their own troops begging for their lives. Entire command centers went dark overnight. No explosions, no distress calls, just silence. The last transmission from one of their high-ranking generals was a single cryptic phrase: "We should have never come here." Panic spread through the Empire's ranks. The humans had transformed from an insignificant species into something worse than an enemy. They had become an unrelenting force, a nightmare given form. The Zeldar had made a mistake. They had waged war against humans, and now they realized they were the ones being hunted. Zeldar Command had no choice but to escalate. What was once a calculated invasion turned into an act of desperation. More fleets were deployed, reinforcements pulled from critical territories, entire sectors left undefended just to contain the growing catastrophe that was Earth. It didn't matter. Nothing changed. The harder they pushed, the worse it became. Humanity was not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. They learned from every battle, adapted to every strategy, turned every loss into a lesson. Their soldiers moved like ghosts, their tactics unreadable. Zeldar generals, accustomed to enemies who cowered before superior firepower, now watched in disbelief as humans repurposed their own technology against them. Captured Zeldar weapons were dismantled, studied, and rebuilt with terrifying speed. Entire supply depots vanished overnight, their contents repurposed into hybrid human-alien war machines. The Empire, once confident in its technological superiority, now faced an enemy that evolved faster than they could react. The losses mounted. Zeldar officers reported engagements where human forces should have been annihilated but emerged stronger instead. Every countermeasure failed. Every strategy collapsed. The war was no longer about conquest. It was about survival. Then came the moment the Empire had never anticipated. Human forces, once confined to Earth, struck beyond their system. Covert strike teams infiltrated deep into Zeldar territory, sabotaging war factories, crippling command centers. Entire fleets were ambushed in what should have been undisputed Imperial space. The war had turned. Humanity was no longer defending itself. They were taking the fight to the Empire. Zeldar military leaders, who once dismissed humans as primitive, now spoke of them in hushed voices. Rumors spread of entire battalions wiped out without a single shot fired, of commanders found dead in locked rooms, their final moments unknown. Fleet admirals abandoned their posts, fearing they would be next. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Zeldar homeworld, a planet never touched by war, protected by defenses that had stood for millennia, fell silent. A fleet was dispatched to investigate. When they arrived, they found only wreckage and a single repeating message on all Imperial channels. This is what you wanted. This is what you feared. This is war. The Zeldar had believed they were the masters of conquest, the pinnacle of warfare. Now they understood the truth. Humanity was not fighting for survival. They were demonstrating a lesson written in the ruin of worlds and the silence of fallen fleets. The High Command, once unwavering in its arrogance, now faced a grim reality. This war would not end with the subjugation of Earth. It would end only when humanity decided it was over. The message was clear. They had started this war, but humanity would decide how it ended. The Zeldar Imperium, once the unchallenged ruler of the galaxy, was now broken. Their fleets, once numbering in the thousands, had been reduced to scattered remnants. Their armies, once feared across the stars, had been shattered. Their homeworld, once the center of their power, was now under silent occupation. And yet, humanity had not destroyed them. They had the capability. They had the technology. They had the opportunity to wipe the Zeldar from existence. But they didn't. Instead, they did something far worse. They let them live. A single message was transmitted across the remaining Zeldar territories. No threats. No demands. Just a simple statement. You wanted war. You have seen war. Remember this lesson. There was no celebration, no declaration of victory. Humanity did not need to gloat. Their actions spoke louder than any words ever could. The galaxy had changed forever, not through conquest, but through fear. Every species that had once feared the Imperium now feared something else. The Zeldar, who had ruled through terror, now lived under its shadow. Their former vassals turned their backs. Their allies distanced themselves. The name human became something whispered in the dark, something spoken with dread. The Imperium was allowed to exist, but not as conquerors. They were now a reminder, a permanent warning of what happened to those who sought to dominate. For the first time in history, a new law was spoken across the stars. Earth is never to be challenged. No fleets would dare approach its borders. No empire would dare provoke its people. The lesson had been learned, burned into the minds of every living Zeldar. A scholar, once proud of his people's supremacy, now recorded the final chapter of their downfall. His voice, once filled with arrogance, now held only reverence and fear. We believed we were the masters of war. We believed our strength was absolute. We believed humanity was nothing more than another conquest. We were wrong. They are not conquerors. They are not invaders. They are something worse. They are the consequence of war itself. He closed the record, knowing it would be the last great entry in the history of his people. The Zeldar Imperium was no longer an empire. It was a relic, a cautionary tale, a civilization allowed to persist only as a warning to others. And so, the war ended, not with the extermination of a species, but with the eternal regret of those who had started it. The galaxy moved forward, but no one would ever forget what had happened, because the Zeldar had once thought themselves the greatest warriors in existence, until they met the masters of war.